So first let me say, if you look at the first page, there's some letters missing here. And there are more letters than I had ever thought possible to describe any kind of sexuality. And of course my topic is homosexuality. And as some of you may know, this topic is never ending. There's so many things to say about this, so many directions to go that coulda, shoulda, woulda, and I didn't. So I'm just going to make it a really surface kind of thing. Just some real basic questions that I thought a group of us could be interested in knowing about. Have you figured out what letters are missing? Okay, I'll give you a hint. Turn the page. And here you have at the top left all the missing letters. So it's really a B, another I, and another T, más o menos. And so along with this comes a dictionary, basically a list of definitions of all kinds of interesting things related to the sexuality of different people and the different terms that are related to or descriptive of the people in this community. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, intergender, asexual, and ally. All of that is listed in here as a definition, so you can look at that if you want to. And any other thing that a phrase or term that you're not familiar with, you might want to look it up there, share it with everybody so everybody will know what kind of terms you're throwing around and you know what they mean. Some have a very finite change or difference in them, and they're very similar. The most interesting that something I had not known is on this under S, same gender loving. Has anybody heard of same gender loving? Well, SGL. It's a phrase coined by the African American Black queer community, used as an alternative for gay and lesbian by people who may see these terms as white.
What page are you on?
Under the S, right after Q, they were in alphabetical order, same gender loving. It's the African American community that is the queer community, the homosexual community. They are defining within themselves a phrase that they want applied to them as opposed to what they perceive the rest of the gay community being white queer community, and they kind of reject that and came up with their own. I thought, well, that's like a subset of a subset of a subset kind of community, very specialized or specific to that particular group. And there's other terms that are very interesting. Differences.
That one seems to be more accurate,
Very much so, and it means more to the Black community or African American community because they came up with it, and that's something that they have an affinity to. Same gender loving. So, and then you'll notice what I thought was interesting is the difference between a transvestite and a transsexual. It's a very specific difference. Just for, I didn't photocopy well on the transsexual, but it is a person whose gender identity is the binary opposite of their biological sex, who may undergo medical treatments to change their biological sex, often to align it with their gender identity. Or they may live their lives as the opposite sex. That's the difference is the medical procedure, the medical treatments. They physically change sex, transsexual.
Like that Olympian.
Yes, similar. And as opposed to a transvestite, who I think a lot of people can confuse. A transvestite is simply a person who dresses as a binary opposite gender expression or cross-dresses for any one of many reasons. And there may be transvestite in the room, we don't know. Because it's not necessarily related to their sexual, biological being, but their preference in expressing the way they dress. And it can be for relaxation, for fun, for sexual gratification. Often they're called cross-dressers. Okay, so all of this you can find online. That's what I did. I didn't give the credit to whoever it is, but more than likely it's Wikipedia. Well, anyway, so it's a topic that is very interesting. I think it's important for us to know more about the homosexual community. If we had a broader section of the Austin community, or maybe even the Texas community, you know, you might want to consider a small example of, well, for instance, if you close your eyes and you start thinking about this homosexual community and your feelings about that, and you may not realize that all of a sudden your legs are closed and your arms are closed like this. You know, that's a big body language that says, I'm not ready to hear or listen or to learn about this. That's not an abnormal reaction, because this is something that not everybody is comfortable with. So there is a question, are you heterosexist? Heterosexism is a system of attitude, bias, and discrimination in favor of opposite sex sexuality and relationships. It can include the presumption that other people are heterosexual, or that opposite sex attractions and relationships are the only norm and therefore superior. That is a heterosexism point of view. Homophobia. Homophobia is a form of heterosexism. It refers to unreasoning fear of or towards homosexuals and homosexuality, and to behavior based on such a feeling. Heterosexism, however, more broadly denotes that the system of ideological thought that makes heterosexuality the sole norm to follow for sexual practices. Heterosexism, as a set of beliefs and attitudes, relies on the core tenet according to which homosexuality and bisexuality do not normally exist, and as such constitute mental illness or deviant behaviors. Within a heterosexual ideology or mindset, the concept of sexual orientation is rejected and deemed irrelevant. A set of more nuanced heterosexist views, which some may consider faith, dogma, universal truths, natural law, appeals to authority or popular beliefs, but others consider to be conventional wisdom or sociobiological knowledge that can include, amongst others, the following. Non-heterosexual persons, should keep their sexual orientation private. They should remain in the closet. Or the attitude that gay men aren't real men, or lesbians aren't real women, because of the socially pervasive view that heterosexual attractions or activities are the norm and therefore superior. Otra vez. So, the concept of quote unquote, God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, or not Madam and Eve. And similar essentialist cultural notions that maleness and masculinity and femaleness and femininity are complementary. Homosexuality being wrong, ungodly, or against nature, it is therefore a sin, evil, or subhuman. Those are other points of view. Views identical and akin to Anita Bryant's statement during her Save Our Children campaign in the United States. She said, "As a mother, I know that homosexuals cannot biologically reproduce children, and therefore they must recruit our children." It's kind of a fear tactic, right? Because of their lifestyle, homosexuals do not have families with children, so they undermine the survival of the human race. Vaya. Oh, jeez.
Say
That's
that
the
again?
end. Because of their lifestyle, homosexuals do not have families with children, so they undermine the survival of the human race. That's pretty hardcore. Perhaps it was true if everybody in the world was a homosexual, but that's not the case, is it? Well, we'll talk about that later. Homosexuality is an affectional and mental or mental disorder, or simply a social ill. Therefore, it can be cured or stamped out. If it is not eradicated, it will lead to social disintegration and societal collapse. My goodness. And lastly, homosexuals can be converted to heterosexuality. You gotta convert them. So, are you homosexual? Homosexuality is from the ancient Greek words meaning same and sex. Homosexuality is romantic and or a sexual attraction or behavior between members of the same sex. As a sexual orientation, homosexuality is an enduring pattern of emotional, romantic, and or sexual attractions, primarily and exclusively to the people of the same sex. It also refers to a person's sense of identity based on those attractions, related behaviors, and members in a community of others who share those attractions. The most common terms for homosexual people are lesbian for females and gay for males. There is no consensus among scientists about why a person develops a particular sexual orientation. Many scientists think that nature and nurture, a combination of genetic, hormonal, and environmental influences, factors into the cause of sexual orientation. The biological factors that have been researched are genetic and hormonal, particularly during the fetal development period, that influence the resulting brain structure and other characteristics such as left or right-handedness. Are you left-handed, are you right-handed, are you homosexual, or are you heterosexual? Scientists favor...
Nick and John, tira con las dos manos.
Okay, that's a different category also included in this time. So, scientists favor biologically based theories which point to the inclusion of genetic and social factors. Substantive evidence which suggests parenting or early childhood experiences play a role when it comes to sexual orientation is minimized. That's what I learned when I did my research. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. But that's a different point. My perspective. Okay? And my
How could
perspective.
you develop an opinion so quickly?
Yes.
You know, I'm talking about like early childhood experiences, because it has such an impact on so many areas of its life.
Exactly. Yes. And I'll just say this as an aside. Well, let me just go a couple of sentences and then I'll add my 2 cents. Because this is research. Scientific research has shown that homosexuality is an example of a natural variation in human sexuality. Homosexuality as a source of negative psychological effects is minimized. Oh my goodness, otra vez. I beg to differ on both of those points. Primarily because I have understood very many people in the homosexual community to have very many issues that are related to childhood experiences and or having the negative psychological effects of just the homosexuality being a part of their life. But within the scientific community, they reduce the importance of it. They're minimized, those 2 points. Anyway, so I'll tell you what I read. That's what I read. Most people experience little or no sense of choice about their sexual orientation. Do you choose to be heterosexual? The most common terms for homosexual people, as I said, are lesbian for female and gay for males. Many gay and lesbian people are in committed same-sex relationships equivalent to heterosexual relationships in essential psychological respects. Since the end of the 19th century, there has been a global movement toward increased visibility, recognition, and legal rights for homosexual people, including the right to marriage and civil unions, adoption, parenting, employment, military service, equal access to health care, and the introduction of anti-bullying legislation to protect gay minors. So how many homosexuals are we talking about here? In 2012, the homosexual population data, Texas is number 2 in the ranking across the United States, 3.6%. That's 579,968 homosexuals in the state of Texas as of 2012. That's a little more than 500,000. With California having the number 1 ranking at 4%, they have a bigger population. The state, of course, 1,338,164. That's 4% of their population. And overall in the United States, 3.8% or 9,083,558. That's a lot of people. So in 2010, the data collected was same-sex households in Texas were 46,401 households. In California, same-sex households were 98,153. That was in 2010. In the year 2000, the homosexual couple households in Texas was 42,912. So that's a little bit, about 3,000 less. So we gained about 3,000 same-sex households in 10 years that were registered, according to the data. And in California, in 2000, it was 92,138, so they gained about 6,000 households, same-sex. So, what are the choices? The choices, well, you can stay in the closet. Being closeted or in the closet means being aware of one's lesbian, gay, or bisexual orientation or true gender identity, yet averse to revealing it because of various personal or social motivations. It can also include denial and refusal to identify as LGBT. Overall, most reasons not to come out stem from homophobia and heterosexism. We just discussed that, and Anita Bryant, which marginalize LGBT people as a group. On a personal level, there are internal conflicts involving religious beliefs, upbringing, and internalized homophobia, in addition to the feelings of fear and isolation. Also, there are potential negative social, legal, and economic consequences, such as disputes with family and peers, job discrimination, financial losses, violence, blackmail, legal actions, restrictions on having or adopting children, criminalization, or in some countries, even capital punishment. Given the number of unpleasant and harmful or even fatal consequences of coming out in world society, it is questionable to call being closeted a bad choice. As a strategy, remaining closeted is the result of various goals to minimize potential loss and harm, or to increase social standing and putative wealth, not just for average people, but also for social figures such as entertainers, athletes, and political leaders. Okay. What about my feelings? Wow. There's a scale, and I want to share this information with you, because on page 3 at the bottom, I introduced the Dorothy Riddle scale. She was overseeing a project for American Psychological Association Task Force on Gays and Lesbians, and the scale was Ms. Riddle's analysis as to the modern classification of attitudes towards homosexuality. And the scale is frequently divided into two parts: the homophobic levels, which are the first 4 terms, and the positive levels of attitude, which are the last 4 terms. So, the first 4 terms. The first one is repulsion. I think maybe Anita Bryant kind of falls into that department, or that section. It's a crime against nature. Gays and lesbians are considered sick, crazy, immoral, sinful, wicked. Anything is justified to change them: incarceration, hospitalization, behavior therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, etc. The second one is pity, represents heterosexual chauvinism. Heterosexuality is considered more mature and certainly to be preferred. It is believed that any possibility of becoming straight should be reinforced, and those who seem to be born that way should be pitied as less fortunate, the poor dears. And then the tolerance, we're looking at homosexuality is viewed as a phase of adolescent development that many people go through and most people grow out of. Thus, lesbians and gays are less mature than straights and should be treated with the protectiveness and indulgence one uses with children who are still maturing. It is believed that lesbians and gays should not be given positions of authority because they are still working through their adolescent behavior. That's tolerance. Acceptance still implies that there is something to accept. The existing climate of discrimination is ignored. Characterization by such statements as, "You're not a lesbian to me, you're a person." Or, "What you do in your bed is your own business," or, "That's fine with me as long as you don't flaunt it." That's acceptance. That's kind of on the lower portion of the top half of the scale. Then, of course, you go into the support, where people at this level may be uncomfortable with themselves, but they're aware that of the homophobic climate and irrational unfairness, and work to safeguard the rights of lesbians and gays. They support the community. Then you get to admiration. Admiration is where it is acknowledged that being lesbian or gay in our society takes strength. People at this level are willing to truly examine their homophobic attitudes, values, and behaviors. Then we go into appreciation. The diversity of people is considered valuable, and lesbians and gays are seen as a valid part of that diversity. People on this level are willing to combat homophobia in themselves and others. Then there's a nurturance. This assumes that gay and lesbian people are indispensable in our society. People on this level view lesbians and gays with genuine affection and delight, and are willing to be their allies and advocate. I'm still not sure about my feelings. Did I lose something for someone? Am I feeling a little bit like something's not right within me? There's something that we may have lost, whether it's innocence or love or a particular person and relationship. That's a different scale. And in that scale, we have Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I think we've discussed that before, the model of the different stages on death and dying. And this applies to just about anything. If you'll go down on the bottom of page 5, Kubler-Ross later expanded her model to include any form of personal loss, such as the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, income, major rejection, the end of a relationship or divorce, drug addiction, incarceration, the onset of disease or chronic illness, an infertility diagnosis, and even minor losses. So I would say that this personal loss model, different stages, can apply to this particular community and the heterosexual community as well. The realization of someone in your community, in your family, close to you, or even you, there's a certain amount of readjustment, a reassessment, a certain amount of loss that you may feel, whether it's the loss of that friend or that love or that what you thought was and isn't anymore. Then you'd go through these different stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So that's what you do with your feelings. if you have any feelings of that sort. And lastly, I want to mention the LGBT population by state in the year 2012. And the red X's, there's 3 of them, where the union or marriage amongst the gay or lesbian community has been found unconstitutional, or it's still pending in the courts. The others are very much a legal status for marriage, and the legal statuses are for New Mexico, Oklahoma, Colorado, Arizona, and of course the ones that are unconstitutional and are the ban is pending are Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas.
Wow, so for anyone who is my age or older, I'm imagining that for many of us, many of these topics were taboo for a long time. Simply meaning we didn't talk about these things. I don't know about you, but when I was a child, I was raised in an environment where we didn't talk about these sorts of things. And so really as a church, we're opening up what has been for a long time a taboo subject. We're talking about something that we just didn't feel comfortable about talking for many, many years, for generations. And so for us to be opening it up, we just have to acknowledge up front that this could be this is an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. When we see things in the news, so Deacon Angelita pointed to Bruce Jenner. I don't know about you, but I remember as a kid looking at the Wheaties box and seeing Bruce Jenner, seeing this gold medal decathlon winner who was on the Wheaties box, and that's been my picture of Bruce Jenner for so many years, for so many decades, that now to see Bruce Jenner is no longer Bruce Jenner, the person who was previously Bruce Jenner is now Caitlyn Jenner, it creates some cognitive dissonance. You know, when a person in our family or among our friends, when we thought of them one way for so long, and then now they give us new information and we think of them in a different way, it creates this cognitive dissonance. And let's just acknowledge up front that's difficult for a lot of people and especially for a lot of families. So eventually we need to get to the question of what does all this mean for us as Christians and as Catholics. This is of course in Catholic social justice, so thank you Deacon Angelita for stepping into the waters of such a taboo subject, because when Deacon Angelita shared with us this glossary, I counted 54 different terms, many of which not even I have heard of before, right? What does it mean to be a cis man or a cis woman? What? I've never heard of these words before. But at the same time, for us to be opening our eyes to the fact of how it is that there's a rich vocabulary. We used to think in a more binary way. We used to think more in terms of dualisms, that everything is black or white, right or wrong, good or bad. In the case of sex and sexuality, everything is either male or female. Male or female, masculine or feminine, etc. So to see how it is that a lot of these definitions start to blur these lines. How it is that someone is born a man but self-identifies in a different way. Or acts in a different way. Is born a man but acts in a feminine way. Is born a man or self-identifies as a woman. Whew. This for us is jarring, right? When we as a couple are preparing to have our child and we hear that it's a boy or that it's a girl, we tend to think in one way. You know, we tend to load onto that term boy or girl so many things. If it's a boy, he's going to like baseball. If it's a girl, she'll be good at cooking. Whatever stereotypes or ideas we have about these gender stereotypes and how it is that they may not turn out to be that way. So Deacon Angelita handled a lot of the social issues, fascinatingly, because within our own lifetimes, it was in 1973 that the American Psychological Association declassified homosexuality as a mental disorder. So for part of our lives, this is something that was wrong and that was bad. So to go from that to the current state of affairs, this is jarring and difficult for a lot of people, and I struggle with it at times myself. What can we say about all this as a church? only because people will look at the Bible and will tell us that the Bible says in the book of Genesis, if we've all read the book of Genesis, how it is that the city of Sodom fell. Do you remember the story? The city of Sodom fell because of homosexuality, or because of sodomites. Ooh, have we heard that word before? So, homosexual persons have sometimes been referred to as sodomites. Where does that come from? That comes from the Bible. The crime of sodomy. I wonder what it's like here in Texas. Do we know the laws regarding sodomy here in Texas? I know that when I first moved to Texas in 1995, sodomy was a crime. That is to say, to express affection publicly for a person of the same sex was something you had to be extremely careful about. Sodomy, then, that word comes from the Bible, the book of Genesis. And what's fascinating is that within our own time, a priest, a Roman Catholic priest, named Father Daniel Helminiak, has helped us to think through these issues. First of all, where have we heard this name before? Father Daniel Helminiak. For those of us here in Austin, Texas, who may have a relationship to Cristo Rey Catholic Church, he was the associate pastor at Cristo Rey from 1986 to 1987. And so how interesting that it's someone who's close to us. He was here as a priest, serving under Father Kirby. Father Kirby was the pastor at the time. Had two associates with him, Father Michael Sis, now Bishop Michael Sis of the Diocese of wherever he is, and Father Daniel Helminiak, his other associate pastor. Well, Father Daniel was here. He was going to the University of Texas, and as a result of all this, in 1994, he published a book called What the Bible Really Says About Homosexuality. What the Bible really says about homosexuality. This is a book that I recommend to any parent who comes to me struggling with the fact that his or her son or daughter is coming to a discovery of him or herself that's not fitting traditional gender roles. This is the book that I point them to. Why? Because so many of us as Christians and as Catholics are programmed to think that this is bad. This is a terrible, terrible thing. Why? Because the Bible says so, right? And it's Father Daniel Helminiak who unpacks that, who unpacks what the Bible really says about homosexuality. And so whether it's the story of Genesis, the sin of Sodom, he talks about, wait a minute, why did Sodom fall? Was it due to the homosexual behavior expressed by various persons in that story, if we read the story? Or is it because of inhospitality? His conclusion is, wait a minute, Sodom didn't fall due to homosexual activity of anyone in the town. It fell due to the people's inhospitality. God's angels, God's visitors were there among the people, and they were not hospitable. They were definitely not hospitable, which is where the homosexuality come in. So, Genesis, he unpacks. Leviticus, there's a line in Leviticus, when a man lies with another man, it is an abomination before the Lord. Whew. How are we to interpret that then, right? Okay, he takes a look at that within the purity codes of that day, and he unpacks that and he essentially says, wait a minute, let's not be taking passages like this out of context. He takes a look at Romans, 1 Corinthians, and 1 Timothy, and in all of this, what he's doing is he's taking Bible passages that have been interpreted as saying one thing, and he tries to just take a look at the historical context of it and say, his conclusion, Father Daniel Helminiak, is that the Bible does not talk about homosexuality. Homosexuality is a new thing. The Bible may speak about homosexual acts in some contexts, but we have to be very careful about trying to interpret what the Bible says about this. Book I highly recommend. Okay. What also makes this difficult is not only do we have Scripture that has been interpreted to say something about these issues, but we also have the Church's tradition. And we remember that where the Church, the Roman Church especially, has tended to come from on this issue has been through the lenses of natural law. Natural law means that we as human beings have certain inclinations. In the same way that if a ball is on an incline, on a slope, if a ball is on an incline, it will be inclined to go down. It can't sit on the incline. The ball will be inclined to go down. We as human beings have certain inclinations. We've talked about this before. And according to natural law theory, it was thought that men should be inclined toward women or women toward men. That's the natural inclination. And anything that's contrary to that, according to the church, was judged to be intrinsically evil. So the church's use of this word, we talked about that in our course on morality. Is there anything at all on this earth that can be intrinsically evil? Because what that means is even before intention and even before circumstances are considered, it's already evil. This is a tough one, because when we come to notions of sin, you have to intend it for it to be a sin, right? If I intend to murder a person, then it's a sin. If I don't intend to murder the person and I accidentally and I accidentally kill that person, it's a terrible thing. It's evil, but it's not a sin. Sin involves the intention. Sin also depends on the circumstances. So if I kill that person in self-defense, that's different from killing that person because that person took something from me. So a lot of it depends on intention and circumstances. To say that something is intrinsically evil means, no, it doesn't matter what your intention is, it doesn't matter what the circumstances, it is just evil. The inclination, for instance, the natural inclination is one thing, and you're going against it. The Roman Church has tended to say that homosexuality, bisexuality, pansexuality, all of those, many of those terms that we see there, are intrinsically evil and or intrinsically disordered, and so the church has struggled with these things. Fortunately, in the American Catholic Church and in independent Catholic traditions, we don't have all of that baggage. That is to say, in the Roman Church, they come back to natural law and have difficulty taking a look at these issues outside of natural law theory. So that even the most recent documents from the Roman Catholic Church struggle with these issues because they're still thinking of these things as intrinsically evil and or disordered. The American Catholic Church, we just have to believe. I loved Deacon Angelita's question. Did we hear her? Her question was, did you choose to be heterosexual? That's a great question. Because if you chose to be heterosexual, then maybe the person beside you chose to be homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, whatever word we're going to use to describe that person. And all of those mean different things. If you chose to be how you are, then maybe that person chose to be how he or she is too. But if you didn't choose, then maybe the conversation needs to go in a different direction. So as a church then, that's why in the American Catholic Church and in the independent Catholic tradition, we've tended to be more inclusive, more accepting of persons, because we realize that the world is more complex than this black and white, right or wrong, good, bad, male, female, this binary system, this dualistic system that we've relied on for centuries. That maybe it's more complex than that, and that maybe all of us, regardless of how we self-identify or express ourselves, maybe we're all children of God after all. How's that for a radical thought? Bruce Jenner one day, Caitlyn Jenner the next day. Caitlyn, I don't understand why you did what you did. I don't foresee ever doing anything like that for myself. But you know what? You're still a child of God, and I love you. You're still my son or daughter or brother or sister, whatever relationship we have to these people, and there's no escaping that. People make all sorts of decisions outside of sex and sexuality. We make all sorts of decisions in life. We won't always understand the decisions that other people make. But our call is to love and accept them. Questions, comments? This is a taboo subject, something that we as a church would not have been talking about 20, 30 years ago. The book was written only in 1994, right? This is so recent. It took the church 1900 years to talk about this issue as far as how it relates to the Bible.
We are a very big family because 3,000 some odd people, they get together at a reunion and we have a bunch of them hanging around, moving around in there and all that. At first, there was like, wow, hey, what's going on here? We don't like this here and all that. And finally, I guess they kind of talk to it and they start seeing, hey, look, they're playing just like all the rest of them playing. They're playing there together and everything else.
So in the same way that we push them away as families, we've also pushed them away as a church. Statistically, if Deacon Angelita is right, she said 3.8% of Americans self-identify in this way. That's just those who self-identify in this way. Not she referred to those who are still in the closet. Not even talking about those. Those who've come out and are comfortable with who they are. That represents 1 out of every, help me with the math here, 1 out of every 25 to 33 people in the United States self-identifies publicly in this way. So that's a challenge. Should we as a church be pushing them away and calling them names? Or should we find some other way of looking at them eventually? Statistically, I always say, it depends on what survey you hear. If Deacon Angelita is telling us that in the United States roughly 3.8% of people in the United States, 4% of Californians self-identify as this way, we've got to believe that the actual number of persons who privately self-identify in this way could be larger, which is why I always say that it usually ranges somewhere between 4 to 13% of the United States population. Which is why I say at Mass, for instance, roughly 1 out of every 10 family members and friends finds themselves internally struggling with these issues. 1 out of every 10. So think of your own family. My word, think of 3,000 limones, right? 3,000 members of the limon family. 3,000, count to 10. Every time you count to 10, just know that one of those 10 is likely struggling internally with this issue.
There was one of them, one time mentioned to me, you know, of course I found out before you there. I found out before the parent did. and one of the parents approached me, his wife, he was kind of split, and she decided to die. So he had the son, it was the only son. You know that. Before you know it, you know, the father pushed the son away, you know, like, you're not my son, you're gonna be doing this, do that, and all this. And now the people couldn't believe, that's your only child. That's your child. How can you do that? So I was asked by him, what will you do? How you do this and all that? And I said, for what? He's the same kid. He puts on the pants the same way every morning, one leg at a time. So you know, hey, so it's good. Just because the kid approached that, hey, that I think I'm being gay. I think I'm gay. You know, I'm beginning to feel this and that.
So theologically, that's fascinating because theologically, okay, do we respond to push people away, disown them, disassociate ourselves from them, thinking that it's evil, wrong, bad, etc.? Or what images do we have in the Bible? And the image that we have in the New Testament is of Jesus, not so much judging and condemning people, but of loving and accepting and forgiving them. That's a challenge. For many of us who are programmed to think a certain way, that's a challenge. To think, okay, and 3,000 members of the Limon family are gathering for a family reunion. 3,000, if statistically roughly 1 out of every 10 is struggling with this issue, that's 300 people at the family reunion. That's an issue.
Well, it makes you hurt on that person too. I mean, you get together, like I say, in that gatherings and all that, people sitting with each other, a lot of people sitting on tables together and all that, and just because they're sitting there, I'm not going to sit right there with them or whatever, you know, you got to kneel and stuff. But no, we got to sit down together. We hug each other and everything else. Which hugging is really one of our big things in the whole family anyway, with everybody that we know, we see everywhere and all. So, you know, just to show the others and to show the kids also, hey, it's not bad for you to play with those kids or for this other. No, just you enjoy like their kid. Enjoy yourself, have a good time, and whatever you see, hey, cuz, how you doing, cuz? They hug each other, talk about, you know. Don't tell the differences.
Which is the model that we have in Luke 15, going back to the Bible, right? Luke 15, we have the story of the prodigal son. The father gave his son his inheritance. The son went off and blew it. When the son came home, how did the father treat him? Did the father disown his son? No. Father welcomed him home.
Welcome home. You know.
So the irony, the religious leaders in Jesus' own day were the ones who screamed for his crucifixion. It just seems the religious leaders of our day have to be following in the footsteps of Jesus, not in the footsteps of the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.